Welcome to the Containment Zone. There's a hum in the dark. Not the kind that travels through wires or rattles from some ancient machine, but a more primitive sound, like something coiled beneath the floorboards, waiting for silence. Waiting for your breath to run out. It's faint, constant, and most disturbingly, familiar. At the heart of a forgotten military depot buried in the Ural Mountains, one that officially hasn't existed since 1982, sits SCP-902, resting in a reinforced containment cradle designed for nuclear ordnance. The Foundation took possession of the object after the fall of the Soviet Union, during an audit of unresolved wartime anomalies. This audit produced 38 separate unexplained phenomena. Only one was still ticking. 902 is a sealed, unopenable metal box, no hatches, no seams, no wiring. And yet, everyone who hears it will tell you the same thing. There's something inside, and it's counting down. But to what? No one can say, because 902 is already too late. Its surface is covered in faded cyrillic, burned black by time and sanded smooth by overattention. The initial tags listed it as a storage component for classified weapons. But its weight was wrong, its material density inconsistent. Internal scans produced nothing useful, no magnetic signature, no heat radiation, and yet it pulses with significance. People assigned to 902 begin to experience a loss of specificity. Not memory loss in the typical sense, but a kind of cognitive fatigue, like trying to remember the middle word of a sentence you never finished. They start asking strange questions. What were we trying to contain? Has it already happened? Did we let it out? The answers never satisfy, because 902 resists finality. It's a story stuck mid-sentence, a breath drawn but never released. Even the object's containment file has changed hundreds of times, not because it's updated, but because it forgets itself. One report noted the object was found beside a lake in Kazakhstan, half buried in ash. Another claimed it was uncovered in an Iraqi bunker after the Gulf War. Another described a failed space capsule that crashed into a Siberian glacier, bringing with it the artifact. No two accounts agree, but all agree on one point: it was never supposed to be found. And yet, everyone who finds it claims they were always meant to. There is a theory, written in pencil in the margins of an early containment draft, that SCP-902 only exists when you're aware of it, that its presence in space and time is not consistent, but entirely conditional on attention. That it was created not to be used, but to be feared. A shape designed not to hold something, but to make you wonder what you've already lost. There are no photos, no interior schematics, not even a color, just an unconfirmed observation repeated in every report. It makes a sound like a clock, but wrong. Like time imitating itself. The last technician assigned to 902 was found slumped against its casing, lips moving silently, eyes unfocused. He'd recorded nothing for 8 days. His final log was only a single sentence: "I think we already missed it. I think it already happened. I think that's why it's still counting." They removed him from duty. He died 2 days later, in his sleep. No cause of death, only a faint ringing in the audio logs taken from his room. The same frequency emitted by SCP-902, a frequency too consistent to be mechanical, too erratic to be alive. The sound of an ending that refuses to begin, or perhaps one that already did. There was never a breach. That fact, if it can be called that, is listed in bold across 7 distinct Foundation documents, each one dated differently, each one stamped "New Incident Reported." And yet, every one of those files was created in response to a reported breach of SCP-902. No alarm was triggered, no camera footage was lost, no personnel went missing. But something changed. One night, it is never specified which, the containment chamber was opened, not breached, not forced, opened as if by protocol. The logs show no entry, no override, no record of a human presence. But the air pressure had shifted. The walls bore condensation streaks not present before, and most disturbingly, the sound inside had grown louder. Where once it was an ambient murmur, a dull, rhythmic nothing, the object now emitted something closer to a heartbeat. But offbeat, like a rhythm played backward, time regurgitating itself. 2 agents independently reported dreams involving the object, being swallowed by a red hallway, faces flickering on walls, and clocks that ticked in reverse vertical alignment. ticking down, but upward, toward a ceiling that sagged with weightless pressure. One of them resigned. The other never reported to duty again. His Foundation badge was found 2 weeks later at the bottom of a storm drain, partially melted, though no acids were detected. Then the compulsion began. Exposure to SCP-902 did not induce violence or madness, not the usual Foundation fare. It induced an ideological convergence. Personnel began developing a shared theory, not taught, not read, not spoken aloud, about the nature of the object, that the box wasn't holding something. It was anchoring something, an absence, a thing that should have occurred but did not. A failed moment in history given weight, shape, and dimension. They described it with words like remorse, pre-event, temporal hernia. Some even claimed it was the memory of a war no one had yet fought. But there were side effects. Some began to hear whispers in unfamiliar languages. Others reported being unable to finish sentences without inserting a number, often a single digit, spoken compulsively mid-thought, then forgotten. Example: I was cataloging the behavior logs from the 8 Eastern Wing, and I think the camera saw it, 7, but I couldn't be sure. In every case, the number they inserted was one smaller than the last. Countdowns. Unnoticed. Embedded in language like parasites. The memeticists ran emergency scans and discovered something deeply unsettling. The concept of SCP-902 itself was becoming contagious. Not in symbols, not in images, but in structure. The way ideas aligned themselves after contact with the object. Reports started to repeat themselves. Memos became recursive. Certain personnel insisted they had already filed documents they were just now writing. Reality wasn't breaking. It was looping, subtly, gently, but unmistakably. Each attempt to redefine SCP-902 resulted in a slightly shorter description. Each file update contained fewer details than the one before. And yet, personnel felt more confident about their understanding of it. It's clearer now, one said. It's less muddy, like we've almost remembered it. No one had access to the object itself anymore, and no one noticed when that decision was made. Only that it felt correct, the way decisions often feel after they've already happened. SCP-902 was placed in a subchamber within Site-19, behind cognitohazard shielding and temporal dampeners. Not to prevent escape, but to slow down comprehension, because the box was still ticking. And with each second, the world became a little more confident that nothing had ever been wrong, just incomplete. That's when the clock stopped working, not just inside Site-19, across the whole Foundation network. Atomic, mechanical, digital, and even the biological clocks in test subjects all froze for exactly 9 seconds at 0:41:17 a.m. UTC, then resumed as if nothing had occurred. Only those near SCP-902 remembered the pause, and every one of them agreed on one thing. It wasn't a glitch, it was a signal. That was second 0, and now we're counting again. What happened during those 9 seconds? Nothing, according to the logs, everything, according to the silence, and the ticking never resumed. Because the countdown wasn't in the object anymore, it was in them. The box has no mechanisms. Its weight is inconsistent, measured at 423 kilograms by the Russian Federation, 317 by the UN Anomaly Task Force, and 0 kilograms during a brief period in 2007, when it was somehow recorded as being in orbit, despite never having left the Foundation's underground vault. These weight anomalies are not theoretical. They are printed, dated, and co-signed by personnel who no longer recall writing them. Despite the inconsistencies, one thing has never changed. The box is always present. In scans, in photographs, in schematics. It appears, even when not observed, even when it shouldn't. Infrared imagery once captured SCP-902 inside a training compound in Arizona, 2 minutes after it had been resealed inside its storage unit on a different continent. Both events occurred simultaneously. Both reports were verified by Foundation internal review. It's not teleportation, it's timeline abrasion. The object refuses to conform to location, not because it moves, but because it has never been anywhere except where it's about to be. When asked what they remember of transporting it, Foundation logistics teams reply with confusion. One agent, under medical sedation, described the feeling as folding an envelope into a future I already received. He later suffered a fatal aneurysm. His final EEG signal showed rhythmic, non-random pulses at 0.86 Hz. the same frequency SCP-902 emits when submerged in white noise. The object is known to interfere with the language centers of nearby staff. These effects are nonverbal, not hallucinations or spoken compulsions, but a deterioration in semantic clarity. Researchers begin to confuse cause and effect, noun and subject. One linguist reportedly began defining himself as a reaction to a forgotten statement. He was placed on indefinite leave. The note he left behind simply read, "I think the box is remembering me." More concerning are the secondary anomalies. Personnel exposed to SCP-902's cognitohazard field begin to forget not what the object is, but what it isn't. They no longer question its presence. They no longer ask what it's doing. It becomes, over time, assumed. Part of the landscape, like gravity or dusk, the object integrates itself into their psychological architecture. A recurring pattern observed in affected personnel is the insertion of preparatory behavior. Individuals will begin leaving notes for themselves without realizing it, locking doors in patterns matching evacuation codes, or setting alarms for dates that don't exist. In one instance, a senior supervisor was found carving notches into the walls of the Site-19 elevator shaft. When questioned, he said, "Just counting. It helps. For what? I don't know. But we always count before it begins." The number of notches was 0. The Foundation's memetic analysis team attempted to isolate the underlying structure of the object's influence using randomized null contextual sequences. The results were chilling. Each iteration became shorter than the last, structurally simpler, conceptually stripped of metaphor, until, on the 23rd run, the sentence read only, "It is." No subject, no action, no relation, just isness, self-contained, unresisting. This is the ultimate nature of SCP-902, semantic gravity. It is not a box containing something. It is the idea of having already opened it. To understand SCP-902 is to be pulled toward it, not physically, but mentally. Thoughts rearrange themselves around it, like debris swirling into a drain you didn't know was beneath your feet. You cannot stop thinking about it, because your brain confuses cognition with obligation. You think because you're supposed to, because you're counting. And counting always implies an end. Even the object's appearance shifts slightly across recollections. Some describe it as a rectangular casing of Soviet-era steel, others as something closer to stone, wrapped in oxidized copper bands. One notable report described it as having no physical edge, a paradoxically shaped object that seemed to curve into itself while maintaining rigidity. Like a cube trapped in recursion, every description is false, and every description is true. Because the box is not the anomaly, the expectation is. And that is the horror of SCP-902. It doesn't need to do anything, it just needs you to wait. For what? That's irrelevant, because if you've heard this, if you've made it this far, you're already waiting. And it's already too late. They were found in villages first, small places, remote, entirely forgettable, until they weren't. Settlements in Siberia, rural Bhutan, a coastal ghost town in Ireland, none of them connected. None of them strategic, just forgotten corners where the world's noise had thinned. In each of these locations, residents began to describe a ticking, not mechanical, not auditory even. It wasn't heard so much as inferred, like the idea of time dripping behind your thoughts, steady and wrong. Some people described it as a wet tick, others as static with rhythm. One child in Karelia, found hiding beneath her grandmother's floorboards, described it as a clock chewing its own teeth. These reports came in waves, always accompanied by brief mass lapses in communication, Wi-Fi outages, shortwave radio loops, GPS distortion, not enough to raise alarm, just enough to slide by. Every instance lasted exactly 19 hours, give or take 2 seconds, and always someone went missing. A postman in County Kerry, a bus driver in the Hindu Kush, an oil rig supervisor off Sakhalin. Their names vanished from local records within 3 days. Birth certificates vanished, tax records reassigned. Their homes were still intact. Their families, when pressed, insisted they'd never known anyone by that name. But inside closets, folded into winter coats, the Foundation found drawings, pages torn from journals, lists, always numbered, always incomplete. Most stopped at 6. Some went further. One list, recovered in Romania, buried in a time capsule labeled 1946, contained the following sequence. 1. It begins. 2. It forgets. 3. We remember. 4. We try to stop it. 5. We fail. 6. We bury it. 7. We wait. 8. We forget. 9-Sibjom. Nothing written. After 10, the final line was blank. No ink. Just pressure. This behavior, the shared anticipation of a thing never described, began appearing in public forums, especially among conspiracy fringe groups. Event Zero became a phrase among online survivalist circles, interpreted differently by each speaker. Some described it as the day we saw the real moon, others as the war that already ended. No consensus, only urgency. When Foundation operatives attempted to deplatform these voices, they found most of them had already deleted their accounts. A few had vanished. One had posted a final video titled, "Don't Let It Finish." The video contained no imagery, only white screen, and the sound of counting. It began at 11 and ended at 2. The voice was calm, familiar. Later analysis confirmed the voice belonged to a current Foundation Level 3 operative who had no recollection of ever recording the file. His response? "I was never in that room, but it sounds like me, and I believe what he's saying." The most disconcerting pattern in all of this was the tendency for the same phrase to emerge across disconnected populations. A phrase now integrated into SCP-902's updated documentation. It's already too late. Not spoken, not printed, but acted upon. Surveillance from a commuter train in Osaka recorded a woman standing, stepping between two cars, and walking directly off the moving vehicle into darkness. Her last visible gesture was not fear, but completion, as if the act had been long overdue. She left behind no phone, no wallet, only a napkin in her pocket. On it, drawn in black ink, was a box, with the word "soon" written beneath. The anomalous signature of this behavior is not violence, it's closure. The people involved don't scream, don't cry, don't warn others. They act as if the countdown has reached 0, and everything else is an echo. That's the contagion, not madness, conviction. And now, the phrase appears in unexpected places. Graffiti on an abandoned subway wall in Berlin, a crop circle outside Wichita, scratched into a prison wall in Mexico. Always the same shape, always the same implication. It's already too late, but nothing ever happens. No explosion, no revelation, just the feeling that you've missed something terribly important, and the clock was never yours to begin with. The first incident went unrecognized. It was a silence, not absence of sound, but of awareness. At 0411 UTC, all security cameras inside Containment Vault 4 shifted to black. No static, no feed loss, just darkness. Operators logged the occurrence as a routine blackout. The lights returned 6 minutes later. No breach alarms were triggered. But when the footage was reviewed the following morning, something was different. The timestamp was wrong. The camera IDs were misaligned. Footage from one of the angles showed a technician monitoring the room. A technician that no one recognized, wearing a badge registered to a deceased agent. The technician never moves. He only watches. And then, just before the blackout ends, he looks directly at the camera and mouths the word 9. The Foundation issued a Level 2 audit. No breach was found, because the box was still there, still sealed, still humming. The sensors read 0 change in mass, volume, radiation, or pressure. But when asked to confirm their reports, the staff grew hesitant. Records showed responses like, "Nothing has changed. It's always been this way. We've already prepared." One document, now classified as cognitohazardous, simply read, "The box is not the event. The event was storage." After that, systemic breakdowns began to multiply. Scheduling algorithms for Site 4 began looping back onto previous months, assigning maintenance tasks to personnel who no longer worked there. Security clearance levels fluctuated unpredictably. Doors locked and unlocked themselves at exactly 0.86 Hz. An entire wing of Archive Section D was discovered, transcribed entirely in passive voice. No authorship, no attribution, just action without actor. It was moved, it was accepted, it was begun, and worse, no one protested. Senior staff began showing signs of behavioral recursion, conversations looping, personal notes rewritten with minor deviations. One researcher was found to have written the same phrase 14 times in her daily report, "We are ready." But for what? That question no longer appears in any document referencing SCP-902, not because it was never asked, but because the documents that held it have degraded, not in data loss, not deletion, but contextual erosion. The files still exist. They are just unreadable. One example remains, a briefing labeled Final Lock Procedure. It contains 4,721 words, all of them correctly spelled, all of them grammatically sound. But when read aloud, the content becomes meaningless. It describes nothing. It references no object, no location, no time. It reads like a ritual, like preparing for a funeral you're not invited to, but you know it's for you. And the box? It has not moved. But the room it inhabits has. During an unscheduled power audit, it was discovered that SCP-902 is now located in a section of the site that was never built. The blueprints do not show it. The ventilation does not reach it. But the object is there. And the walls surrounding it are made of a material that doesn't match any known Foundation stock. Geologists analyzing a fragment said the structure looked fossilized. When asked what that implied, the response was, "It feels like we're storing something we already unearthed." A cross-reference of internal logs revealed that SCP-902 has been relocated 4 times in the past decade, yet no transfer records exist. No transport teams, no containment orders, only 4 different descriptions of the box's resting place. One buried in reinforced tungsten, one floating in magnetic suspension, one behind a glass wall, one where we will find it last. None of these places exist, yet they are all listed as current in SCP-902's documentation. This is not a containment failure. It is a containment reversal. Where once the Foundation observed the object, they are now the ones being watched, monitored for signs of deviation, tracked for expressions of disbelief. And those who question its nature begin counting. Not aloud, not consciously, but they count all the same. The number varies, but it always ends the same way. 1, 0, close. The Foundation has redacted nothing, because there is nothing to redact. The event hasn't happened, because it already did. They convened at Site-01, not all of them, only those still willing to remember. 7 directors, 12 researchers, and 1 AI integration specialist. The meeting had no agenda, because every record of its planning had already been erased. Yet each of them arrived on time. They didn't speak of SCP-902 by name. They couldn't. It had already rewritten itself into too many timelines, too many reports. Even saying the number became difficult. The few who tried found their mouths hanging open, as if waiting for a number that would never arrive. Instead, They used a placeholder, the box that waits. That name held, just long enough for them to begin. Their plan wasn't elegant, it wasn't even strategic. It was desperate infrastructure. One last ritual of control performed by people who no longer believed in control. The solution was built in a language no longer spoken. A kind of code grafted from a failed SCP mimetic collapse protocol. It wouldn't stop 902, but maybe it could stall it, give the illusion of stasis. They called it the final silencing sequence. It involved redirecting conceptual containment vectors through a triple-blind mnemonic recursion field, essentially convincing every document, sensor, and mind inside Site-01 that 902 had been sealed in the past. Not here, not now. Already resolved. The idea was to build a story so strong, so closed, that even SCP-902 would have to adapt. They activated the sequence. The lights dimmed. All terminals briefly displayed a phrase, visible for 0.83 seconds, "It ends where we began." And then, nothing changed. Or rather, everything did, imperceptibly. Reports about 902 became rarer. References shifted from active to past tense. Technicians began to dismiss the object as irrelevant legacy material. A junior researcher even proposed decommissioning it, citing resource waste. She was found 3 days later in a storage closet, breathing, smiling, counting to 10, over and over. And the object? Still present? Still sealed, still counting. Only now, when approached by staff with the proper clearance, the box no longer felt anomalous. Instead, it felt inevitable, like a gravestone whose date was always in the future, but whose engraving was too old to read. That was the trap. The Foundation had buried it in memory, in doctrine. They had succeeded in making SCP-902 forgettable. And that's exactly what it wanted, because once forgotten, the countdown isn't just uninterrupted, it's unstoppable. No more observation, no more questions, just the dull final click of something that's always been ending. A technician in archives noted a peculiar shift. All references to 902's location now appeared under a different SCP classification, one that did not exist. SCP-000. The first and last. A placeholder. A loop. A system tricked into remembering its own absence. Efforts to correct this have failed. Attempts to access the original documentation return a message. Access granted, memory not found. One by one, personnel begin to forget the containment procedures. Then the object's weight, then its dimensions. There's a term in theoretical memetics, chronological contamination. It refers to the infection of time itself, when knowledge, once accessed, begins to retroactively alter memory. Not just yours, everyone's, all at once. SCP-902 is not the source of chronological contamination. It is its expression. If you are hearing this, it means the count reached you. Perhaps you remember a different version of this story, a different origin, a different ending. That's normal. It's designed to replace your version, not erase it. A substitution, not a deletion. Because deletion implies intent, and SCP-902 has no intent. It simply is, like a ticking heartbeat no longer tied to a body, a countdown long after the war has ended, or before it began. You may feel a sense of anticipation, not dread, not curiosity, just the cold certainty of something approaching. That feeling is not unique to you. Foundation staff who've handled SCP-902 report identical symptoms, a growing awareness of finality, paired with the inability to identify what is ending. And when they sleep, They all report the same dream. A field of obsidian stone, a black cube, smooth as absence, and the sound of breathing, not from the box, from everything else. Some have tried to count the seconds. Others have tried to destroy their clocks. But the time doesn't live in their devices. It lives in the pause. That space before thought, before memory, before you say, "What was I just doing?" And if you listen closely in that moment, between awareness and absence, you'll hear it too. Tick, tick, tick. But you will never hear the last one, because SCP-902 is not the end. It's the echo of a decision we already made. A regret sewn into the bones of history. A lullaby written by those who knew too much and chose to forget. So the box will remain sealed, the room unmarked, the number unspoken, and the Foundation will keep watching, even as the watchers forget what they're watching for. Because some boxes don't hold anomalies. They hold our decision to contain them, and that's what SCP-902 has always been. Not an object, but the moment we started waiting. Welcome to the Containment Zone.